There's a skill that almost nobody is training right now, and it's about to become one of the most valuable things a person can develop in their career. It's not prompt engineering. It's not learning to code. It's not even understanding how AI models work. The skill is this: knowing which ideas are actually worth keeping. For most of human history, the bottleneck in knowledge work was generation. You needed time to research, to draft, to ideate. The person who could produce more, faster, they had an advantage. AI has quietly ended that era. Generation is no longer the bottleneck. So the question is, what is? That's what this video is about. If you're in your 20s or 30s, working in a field that involves thinking, writing, strategy, research, design, marketing, consulting, law, finance, this is directly about your career, not in an abstract, 10 years from now sense. In the sense that the skills you've been told to build and the way you've been taught to prove your value may already be shifting under you. The workers who are already pulling ahead in AI integrated environments share something in common. It's not that they're better at using the tools. It's that they've unconsciously adopted a different mental model for what their job actually is. They've stopped thinking like creators. They've started thinking like editors. And that distinction, once you understand it, changes everything about how you develop your skills. In 1974, a book editor named Gordon Lish sat down with a short story manuscript by Raymond Carver, already a well-regarded writer, and did something radical. He cut it. Deeply. In some stories, more than half the original words were gone. Dialogue stripped out. Endings removed entirely. What remained was spare, compressed, exact. The result was a collection called What We Talk About When We Talk About Love. It became one of the most influential short fiction collections in American literary history. Carver's minimalist style, the style that defined him, was, in large part, a product of editorial judgment. Now, Gordon Lish didn't write those stories, but his judgment, what to keep, what to cut, what the piece was actually trying to say, was arguably as generative as the writing itself. That's the model I want you to hold in your head. Because what Lish was doing in 1974 with manuscripts is exactly what high-performing knowledge workers are doing today with AI output. They are not the source of the words. They are the source of the judgment about which words matter. So let's build the system. This is a 4-step mechanism, and understanding all 4 parts is what separates a working mental model from a vague intuition. Step 1. AI floods the supply of ideas. Scarcity shifts upstream. Economics is useful here. When supply increases dramatically, value migrates to whatever remains scarce. AI has done something very specific to knowledge work. It has made the production of first drafts, initial outlines, background research, and preliminary analyses nearly free in time and effort. In 2019, a consultant who could turn around a well-researched market analysis in 48 hours was demonstrating real skill. Today, a rough version of that analysis can be produced in 20 minutes. The skill of producing the thing has been commoditized. But here's what hasn't been commoditized: deciding whether the analysis is asking the right question. Knowing if the framing is correct. Recognizing when an insight sounds confident, but is actually wrong. The bottleneck has moved. It used to live at production. Now it lives at evaluation. Step 2. Editorial thinking is a specific cognitive mode, not just reviewing. This is where most people get stuck. They hear think like an editor, and they imagine proofreading, catching typos, maybe tightening sentences. That's not what this is. Editorial thinking is a distinct cognitive mode. It asks different questions than creative thinking. Where a creator asks, "What can I make?" An editor asks, "What is this actually trying to do? And does it do it?" Where a creator generates, an editor interrogates. Where a creator adds, an editor subtracts. Where a creator explores possibility, an editor collapses possibility into purpose. Think of it this way. A film editor works with footage they didn't shoot. A music producer works with performances they didn't give. A line editor works with prose they didn't write. None of them are passive. All of them are exercising a form of creative judgment that is entirely their own. It just operates on existing material rather than generating new material. That is the mode that is becoming more valuable. Not because creation doesn't matter, but because creation has become cheap and editorial judgment has not. Step 3. Editorial judgment compounds, but only if it's trained deliberately. Now that you understand what editorial thinking is, here's why that matters for your skill development. It compounds, but only if you're actually practicing it. Here's the problem. Most people use AI tools in a way that quietly atrophies their judgment. They generate something, skim it, make a few tweaks, and ship it. They're not evaluating deeply. They're not asking hard questions about whether the argument is actually sound, whether the structure is doing something real, whether the conclusion follows. They're delegating that part too. Over time, that behavior has a cost. The person who spends 2 years half reviewing AI outputs has practiced neither deep creation nor deep evaluation. They've practiced a kind of frictionless middle state that develops neither muscle. The person who spends 2 years interrogating AI outputs, asking why, testing the logic, identifying the places where confident-sounding language is masking a weak assumption, that person is building something that gets harder to replicate over time. Judgment compounds in the same way domain expertise compounds. It gets sharper with deliberate practice and duller without it. Step 4. The people who understand this are already differentiating themselves. Step back for a moment and look at the bigger picture. In any field that uses AI intensively, 2 behaviors are diverging right now. One group is treating AI as a production tool. They're faster. They output more. They look impressive in the short term, because the volume of work they produce is high. But the quality ceiling is defined by the AI's default outputs, and everyone has access to the same default outputs. The other group is treating AI as a collaborator they need to supervise critically. They spend their time not on generating, but on a specific kind of discernment, distinguishing between the ideas that are merely plausible and the ideas that are actually correct, novel, or useful. They're building taste, calibration, and judgment as explicit professional assets. In the short term, the first group looks more productive. In the medium term, the second group is building something that doesn't commoditize, because it lives inside their head, not inside the tool. Let me make this concrete. 2 people. Same role, same tools, same starting point. Watch what happens 18 months in. Without this understanding, you use AI to produce faster. Your output volume goes up. But when you sit in a meeting and someone challenges the logic of a report you submitted, you feel a quiet uncertainty. Because you didn't interrogate the reasoning, you reviewed the surface. Over time, you start to sense that your judgment isn't developing. You're not sure why. You're working hard. But something feels thin. With this understanding, you use AI as a first draft, then slow down deliberately. You ask, what is this actually claiming? Where is this argument weak? What would have to be true for this conclusion to be wrong? The output takes a little longer. But you're developing a form of discernment, and people around you start noticing that your work has a quality of precision that doesn't feel generic. You become associated with judgment, not just speed. The difference is not effort. Both people are working hard. The difference is what each person is practicing when they sit down each day. One mental model, not a list of habits, just this one thing, because it's the thing that actually changes behavior if you internalize it. The model is called the burden of proof shift. Most people, when reviewing AI output, operate with a default assumption. The output is probably fine unless I spot something wrong. That's the passive mode. It places the burden of proof on the error to reveal itself. The editorial mode inverts this. It starts with, I don't yet know if this is right. It's my job to find out. The burden of proof is on the output to demonstrate that it's correct, not on the reviewer to catch the mistake. In practice, this means when you receive AI-generated work, or when you generate it yourself, you ask a small set of adversarial questions before you move on, not as a formal checklist, as a genuine intellectual habit. Questions like, what is the strongest objection to this? What assumption is doing the most work here? If this were wrong, where would the flaw be? Is this precise, or is it just confident sounding? That's it. That is the whole practical layer. Not because the questions are magic, but because the act of asking them trains the mental mode that generates judgment over time. Every time you do it, you are building calibration. Every time you skip it, you are not. So we started with a question. What is the most valuable skill in an AI world? Here's the answer. It isn't generating ideas. AI does that. It isn't even having domain knowledge. AI can synthesize that. It's the ability to evaluate output against a standard of what's actually true, useful, and precise. That ability lives entirely in a human mind. It compounds with deliberate practice, and it doesn't transfer into a tool. The scarcest thing in an AI-saturated environment is not more output. It's a person with calibrated judgment about which output is worth anything. That's the insight in one sentence. But here's a connected question, one worth sitting with. If editorial judgment is the skill that compounds most in this environment, what does that mean for how we should think about expertise? Specifically, does deep domain knowledge still matter, or does it just become the raw material that makes editorial judgment possible? That's the question the next video answers.